The strange part wasn't the voice. It wasn't the knocking. It wasn't even the fact that someone was calling my name in the middle of the night. The strange part was, there was no room next to mine. The beginning. This happened in 2021, when I moved into a small rented house in a quiet area. The house was simple. One bedroom, a small kitchen, a bathroom, and a narrow hallway connecting everything. There were no extra rooms, no hidden spaces, nothing unusual. At least that's what I thought. The first night, my first few days in the house were completely normal. I unpacked my things, set up my bed, and got used to the quiet environment. But on the fourth night, something changed. I woke up suddenly around 2:18 a.m. At first, I didn't know why. Then I heard it. A voice, soft, whispering, calling my name. The sound. I sat up in bed and listened carefully. The voice came again, clearer this time. It sounded like it was coming from the other side of the wall, like someone was in the next room. But that didn't make sense, because there was no room there. Just an empty wall. Trying to ignore it, I told myself it was probably coming from outside. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe someone passing by. But the voice didn't sound distant. It sounded close. Too close. Like it was right behind the wall. The second night. The next night it happened again. Same time. 2:18 a.m. The voice started whispering. But this time, it said something different. Why aren't you answering? My heart started beating faster. Because the voice didn't just sound close. It sounded familiar. Almost like my own voice. The wall. The next morning, I checked the wall carefully. I knocked on it. Solid. No hollow sound. No hidden space. Nothing. But then I noticed something strange. There was a small mark on the wall, like something had been scratched from the other side. The third night. That night I stayed awake. I turned off all the lights and waited, watching the wall, listening. Time passed slowly. Then, 2:18 a.m., the voice came again. But this time it wasn't whispering. It was clearer, stronger, and it said something that made my body freeze. Open the wall. The decision. I don't know why, but I moved closer to the wall. My hand slowly touched the surface, and then I felt it. A vibration. Very faint. Like something was moving. On the other side. The sound. Then came the knocking. From inside the wall. Knock. 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 Slow. Deliberate. And then the voice said, "Let me out." The ending. I moved out of that house the next day. I never went back. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I still hear that voice. Not from the wall, not from outside, but from somewhere much closer. Like it never really stayed in that house. Part 2. What was inside the wall? After that night, I told myself I was leaving. Immediately. No questions. No investigation. Just leave. The delay. But the problem was, I couldn't leave right away. My lease still had time left. And more importantly, I needed to understand what was happening. Because something about that voice didn't feel random. It felt personal. The recording. The next day, I bought a small voice recorder. If the sound was real, then it could be recorded. That was my logic. That night, I placed the recorder right next to the wall. Then I turned off the lights and waited. The time. I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 2:18 a.m., the voice came again. But this time, I didn't move. I stayed still, listening, recording. The voice. At first, it was the same whisper. Soft, faint, calling my name. But then it changed. The tone became clearer, stronger, and it said something new. You're listening now. My heart started racing, because it sounded like it knew I was awake. The conversation. For the first time, I decided to respond. Very quietly, I said, "Who are you?" For a few seconds, there was silence. Then the voice replied, "I'm you." The cold feeling. The moment I heard that, the air in the room felt colder. Not suddenly, but slowly, like the temperature was dropping little by little. The wall again. The next morning, I checked the wall more carefully. This time, I didn't just knock. I pressed against it. And that's when I noticed something strange. The surface felt slightly uneven, like there was something behind it. Not empty space, but something solid, very close to the wall. The sound from inside. That night, I didn't wait for the voice. I went straight to the wall and placed my ear against it. At first, I heard nothing. Then, a faint breathing sound. Slow, steady, from inside the wall. The recorder playback. I played back the recording from the previous night. At first, everything sounded normal. Then the voice appeared, clearer than before. But there was something else in the recording. Something I hadn't noticed at night. Another sound. Behind the voice. A second layer. Like two voices speaking at the same time. The words. I increased the volume. Listened carefully. And then I heard it. The second voice wasn't speaking to me. It was speaking to the first voice. It said, "Not yet." The realization. That's when I understood something terrifying. The voice in the wall wasn't alone. There was something else in there. Something controlling it. Or waiting. The chain. From that night on, the voice stopped asking me to open the wall. It stopped calling my name. Instead, it started saying something else. Every night. At the same time. 2:18 a.m. The same sentence. Over and over again. Soon. Ending. I packed my things the next morning. I didn't wait anymore. I left the house that day. Without telling anyone. Without looking back. But sometimes, when I listen to that old recording, I hear something new. Something that wasn't there before. A third voice. Very faint. Very distant. Whispering. It's open. Part 3: The Hidden Room. Even after I left that house, I couldn't forget it. The voice. The wall. And most importantly, the recording. The curiosity. For days, I tried to move on. I stayed with a friend. Avoided thinking about it. But curiosity doesn't disappear easily. Especially when something doesn't make sense. And one thing kept bothering me. If there was no room behind that wall, then where was the voice coming from? Going back. 3 days later, I made a mistake. I went back. It was early evening when I arrived. The house looked exactly the same. Quiet. Empty. Like nothing had ever happened. For a moment I stood outside, thinking about leaving. But then I remembered the recording. The voice saying, "It's open." Inside again. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air felt heavier than before. The silence felt different. Not empty, but waiting. The wall. I walked straight to the wall. The same wall. The one where the voice came from. This time I didn't hesitate. I knocked harder. Again. Again. And then something unexpected happened. The sound changed. Hollow. It wasn't solid anymore. It sounded hollow. Like something behind it had shifted. My heart started racing. Because that meant there was space behind the wall. Breaking it. I don't know what pushed me, but I grabbed a tool from the kitchen and hit the wall. Once, twice, 3 times. The surface cracked. Dust fell. And slowly, a small opening appeared. The gap. I stepped back for a second, breathing heavily. Then I leaned forward and looked inside. At first I saw nothing. Just darkness. Then my eyes adjusted, and I realized something that made my body freeze. There was a narrow hidden space behind the wall. A small room. Barely enough for a person to stand. Inside the room. I widened the opening and stepped inside. The air was cold. Colder than the rest of the house. The space was empty. No furniture. No objects. Nothing. Except for one thing. The mark. On the opposite wall. There were scratches. Hundreds of them. Deep. Messy. Like someone had been trying to get out. For a very long time. The recording. My hands were shaking as I took out my phone. I opened the recording. Pressed play. The voice filled the small space. "You're listening now." Then, "I'm you." The sound. And then something happened. Something I will never forget. The recording didn't stop. It continued. But I hadn't recorded anything new. Yet the voice kept speaking. The third voice. This time, it wasn't the same voice. It was deeper. Slower. And it said, "You opened it." The realization. My heart dropped. Because the voice was not coming from the phone anymore. The moment, it was coming from behind me. Inside the hidden room. The ending. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Because I already knew. Whatever had been inside that wall was no longer trapped there. Final line. I left that house again. And this time, I never went back. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I hear that same voice. Not from the wall. Not from the house. But from somewhere much closer. Part 4, it did stay there. After that night, I tried to convince myself it was over. That whatever had been inside that wall was left behind. Inside that house. The silence. For the first few days after leaving. Nothing happened. No voices. No sounds. No strange feelings. Everything felt normal again. And for a moment, I believed I had escaped it. The first sign. It started on the 5th night. I was staying in a completely different apartment. Different building. Different area. There was no connection to the previous place. At least that's what I thought. That night I woke up suddenly. The time was 2:18 a.m. The exact same time. My heart started beating faster immediately. Because I hadn't even checked the time before. Yet somehow, I knew. The sound returns. At first there was nothing, just silence. Then slowly, a sound, very faint, like something moving. Not in the hallway, not outside, but inside the room. The direction. I sat up slowly, listening, trying to locate where the sound was coming from. Then I realized something that made my stomach drop. It wasn't coming from the wall this time. It was coming from behind me. The corner. I turned my head slowly toward the corner of the room. The lights were off. Everything was dark. But for a brief moment, I thought I saw something. A shape. Standing there. Not moving. Watching. The voice. Then the voice came again. Clearer than ever before. Not whispering. Not distant. Right next to me. It said, "You opened it." The truth. At that moment, I understood something I wish I hadn't. It was never about the house. It was never about the wall. It was about me. The recording again. The next morning, I played the recording again. The same file. The same audio. But something had changed. There was a new part at the end. Something that hadn't been there before. The new line. A third voice. Clearer now. Closer. And it said, "We're not in the wall anymore." The pattern. From that night on, the time never changed. 2:18 a.m. Every night. No matter where I was. No matter where I went. The same moment. The same feeling. The reflection. One night I made a mistake. I looked into the mirror. At exactly 2:18 a.m. And what I saw was not just my reflection. There was something behind me. Standing still. Not moving. Not breathing. Just watching. Ending. I don't sleep at that time anymore. I stay awake. I keep the lights on. And I never look behind me. Final line. Because I've learned something the hard way. Some doors are not meant to be opened.